Let me ask you a real question. How do two women who've never even met in person end up hating each other so much that one of them ends up dead and the other one serving time for her murder? The Carlos effect is how. When people do the most, I do the analysis. Let's go. No offense to men in the music industry, but Carlos Smith is an aspiring rapper whose lyrics gives us a glimpse into his mindset and his character. In one rap, Carlos says, "They're calling me psycho. If a bitch leaves me, I'ma shoot her with my rifle." Okay, we can say it's just rap or words that have no relevance to his real life, but I beg to differ. And why is that? Because Romeca Blackmon is proof that Carlos doesn't take rejection well. After they broke up, Romeica showed up to Carlos's apartment to pick up clothes that she had left behind. And this is the result of that interaction. Psycho? Perhaps not, but it does make him an ain't shit baby daddy, not only for punching his child's mother in the eye, but also for doing it in the presence of their child. So no, Carlos didn't shoot her with a rifle, but according to his rap sheet, Carlos seems to have a bit of a fascination with guns. He has felony weapons charges, which makes him a repeat offender. And although Carlos Smith has never been married, he does have children with different women. And instead of him taking a page out of the playbook of some of the more notable rap artists, the ones with multiple baby mamas like Lil Wayne, Offset, Young Jock, and DaBaby, to name a few. Of course, Carlos is not on their level of fame, I get that, but those rappers don't have their baby mamas fighting against each other. They manage their careers and raise their children from separate households, sometimes bringing them together as a blended family for bonding and special events. But what does Carlos do? He pitted two young, beautiful black women against each other, women who had 0 children when they first got with him. And as a first-time mother, Carlos had the opportunity to show them love for family and help make both women comfortable in their position with him. But no, Carlos chose division. These women were convinced that Carlos was the prize. Carlos draped them in designer brands. He made them feel like he was a loving and caring boyfriend, like he was a model father and a good provider. But beyond the material things, Carlos was a manipulative man in their life who used his charm and 48 laws of power to get what he wanted. Both women wanted that family group dynamic of a mother, father, and child all living under the same roof. Marriage was optional, and there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of women want that. The problem, though, is that Carlos was never interested in being tied down with one woman as a family man. He was a ladies' man, a free spirit, if you will, and a serial cheater. Quadajah Johnson is the most successful product of the Carlos effect, but Romeica woke up. She ended that abusive relationship with Carlos and she moved away, keeping her whereabouts and contact information private. But it ended up costing her her life. Now let's talk about that. Quadajah Johnson was convinced that she was in a competition with Romeica. Never mind the fact that Romeica's actions said, to hell with those 10 years with that man. Carlos painted such a negative image of his first baby mama, Romeica, that Quadajah teamed up with Carlos to find Romeica, serve her with a stalking no contact order, and end her life across from her son's school because that's the only good location information that Carlos supplied her with. If only the order was used as intended, Romeica would have been behind bars, not Quadajah, but no, I don't think that was part of the plan. During court proceedings when Quadajah Johnson was seeking that order of protection against Romeica, we learned through court documents that Carlos gave Quadajah a piece of mail containing Romeica's address, so Quadajah could serve Romeica with the protection order from a process server. When the judge asked Quadajah how she obtained Romeica's address, her response was, "We share the same child's father." Meaning what, Quadajah? That Carlos gave it to you? Or that you took it from his apartment? Carlos told Quadajah where his son attended elementary school. Why did Quadajah need to know that? These women didn't even care for each other, so why arm Quadajah with his son's school location? Even after obtaining the restraining order by default, Quadajah didn't follow protocol. She never called 911, which should and would have put the process in motion to arrest Romeica for violating an order of protection. But that scenario would require Romeca Blackmon to be still alive today. Carlos wanted Romeica gone for reasons of his own, and I believe he convinced Quadajah that ending Romeica's life was the only way to get rid of her for good. So where am I going with all this? When you really step back and look at this situation, it almost feels like a tragic social experiment on conflict and how it can be manufactured. A playbook, if you will, of gaslighting and manipulation. Because from everything that has come out publicly, the negative things these two women believed about each other, the rumors, the resentment, the jealousy, all of it came through Carlos. Just think about that. Immediately after Romeica's death, Carlos began sharing private video footage of Romeica in a very negative light. He enlisted his writers to publish the videos widespread throughout social media. The video showed angry Romeica, a very violent Romeica, and crash out Romeica. But all of what we saw was the aftermath. None of the video showed Carlos's action, just Romeica's reaction to something that infuriated Romeica. That's the Romeica that Carlos wanted the world to know. And this was all done in a way to sway public opinion about Quadajah and why she would actually fear for her life when faced with a confrontation with someone like Romeica. Now let me remind you that all that footage was toxic relationship dealings between Carlos and Romeica. The two women had never even met each other before, and neither woman built a relationship with each other directly. They built an opinion of each other, a very negative one at that, through a middleman. And that middleman happened to father children with both of them. There are also rumors that another person, a mutual friend, and I'm using air quotes right now, of both Quadajah and Romeica, had been a dog carrying a bone back and forth between the two women. Why either one of them trusted that frenemy is beyond me. But even still, Carlos began planting his seed, both literally and figuratively, to place a wedge between Romeica and Quadajah in a very successful and diabolical way. Now think about how dangerous that dynamic became. You have one person who's controlling the narrative between two people who don't even communicate directly. That person has the power to shape the entire story. He can tell one woman, "Look what she said about you." And then he can go right to the other woman and say, "You know she's jealous of you, right?" He can exaggerate and stir up emotions that normally would only come from having a bad personal experience with someone. Then suddenly you have two people building real anger towards someone that they've never even had a real interaction with. Another thing that stands out in this situation was the way the tension started showing up online. People noticed the subtle competitions. We saw posts that seemed like they were aimed at each other, but they were indirect comments. Jealous energy, comparisons, and the sad part is social media has a way of turning private insecurities into public performances. During that infamous "I Would Never" video starring Quadajah Johnson, there was a failed attempt to shame Romeica for being with Carlos. What she actually exposes is the fact that Carlos has been playing in both their faces, and she's also describing herself doing a lot of things that she said she'd never do.
While I was pregnant, I would never want to be a bitch like
Quadajah sounds obsessed with being a baby mama to Carlos. That entire focus of her rant was about Quadajah being pregnant with Carlos's child and Romeica's job/financial status. Arming Quadajah with all this information is how Carlos was able to plant the seed of jealousy and hatred between two young black mothers, both whose only child, only son, was fathered by Carlos Smith. In the video, Quadajah tells us that Romeica begged Carlos to be with her while Quadajah was pregnant with his child, wore matching clothes with Carlos despite him being with Quadajah, wanted to represent a family structure with Carlos even though Quadajah says that he'd moved on. That Carlos not only cheated on Romeica during their entire 10-year relationship, including the pregnancy, but she contracted an STD from Carlos during her pregnancy. I'm willing to bet that that information came from that mutual friend because Carlos damn sure didn't leak it. How would Quadajah know that Romeica had a job in the nursing field? And better yet, why was Quadajah so disgusted with the nursing duties of aiding elderly patients and helping them because of their disability or declining physical or mental state? Was Quadajah even around when Romeica's car needed repairs for those 2 years? Who told Quadajah that Romeica remained in a long-term relationship with Carlos while he got multiple women pregnant during that time? And why would she even want a man like that? Quadajah said Carlos played in Romeica's face for 10 years, yet this is the man that she chose to have her first child with. How does Quadajah know about Romeica's birthday party and how she got there? Was she even in the picture then? We know she wasn't invited to the party. The mutual friend that Romeica confided in is also in cahoots with Carlos. She's part of the larger plan to cause division, jealousy, competition, and death. Instead of two women recognizing that they were dealing with the same toxic man, they shifted the focus to each other. Who looked better? Who he loved more? Who had the better relationship with him? Who was he spending time with? But the real question nobody stopped to ask was, why were they competing over someone who was clearly comfortable with keeping both of them emotionally tangled up? What also makes this whole situation so heartbreaking is how short the timeline was. From what we know, Quadajah had only been in the picture for a little over a year, maybe 2 years tops. In the grand scheme of things, that's barely enough time to fully understand someone's character. Hell, I've had plants that have been around longer than that. Yet within that short time, the hostility toward Romeica had escalated to a point where it became toxic. It was so toxic that when these two women finally crossed paths on December 8th of 2025, it didn't end in a conversation. It ended in a fatal confrontation. And this is where the think piece comes in, because this story forces a bigger question. How often are women pushed into conflict with each other when the real problem is the man standing in the middle? It happens more than people want to admit. A man tells one woman half the story, he tells the other woman a different version, but both women believe that they're defending themselves. Meanwhile, the person who created the tension in the first place steps back and just watches the chaos unfold. And by the time the truth surfaces, the damage is already done.
A lot of details came out in court today for the hearing of Quadajah Johnson, including the fact that this was the first time when the shooting unfolded that she allegedly laid eyes on Romeca Blackmon. Very first time we are hearing from Carlos Smith. He was the man on the scene when this tragic shooting unfolded. So a lot of information came out in court today. Witnesses saying what they saw, but you were there. What's your reaction to what you heard came out in court today?
When I heard it, I'm just looking. You know, it was unbelievable, but I was there. And I know for a fact none of that happened, how they just explained it. But my truth will get out here, and I hope everybody understand.
Romeca Blackmon has a village of supporters behind her who want nothing more than to see justice served in the criminal court for her untimely and wrongful death. The trending hashtag is Justice for Romeica. Quadajah Johnson has a few supporters behind her, some family members, on her mother's side that is, and 3 YouTube content creators. They believe that Quadajah's actions on September 8th was a lawful and justified self-defense killing. The trending hashtag is Fair Trial for Holly. Because without a fair trial for Holly, there will be no real justice for Romeica. Holly is Quadajah's social media name, but if you want to research information on this murder case, you'll have to search using her government name, which is Quadajah Johnson. Carlos Smith has no family members who are outwardly supporting him, but he does have one male friend and those same 3 content creators supporting Quadajah, who's behind bars charged with first-degree murder. But they're supporting Carlos, who hasn't even been charged with anything, at least not yet, in relation to the September 8th killing of Romeca Blackmon. Carlos, where are your people?
I'm just tired of the lies and everything, what they said I did. I know for a fact it wasn't true. I didn't headlock her, I didn't beat her with the door. I only try to defuse the situation. They keep deflecting away from that.
You ruined that girl's life and you killed my sister, bitch!
Now, a lot of people want to see Carlos charged in this murder, whether it be accessory to murder or involuntary manslaughter. I heard some people say they don't even care if it's for child endangerment. They just want to see Carlos Smith charged. Hashtag lock his ass up. But he's not locked up. And he hasn't even been charged. The actual killer has been charged, and the prosecution is arguing that the actual shooter is currently off the streets, needs to remain in custody, and needs to be convicted at trial of murder with intent to kill. Yes, Carlos is a bad man. No, he's not a good boyfriend. Yes, he is a serial cheater. And no, he's not a good or responsible father. No good father would ever beat on his child's mother. Now let me say this. I read through pages and pages of Illinois law as it relates to murder, and none of it, not a single page of it, makes mention of an ain't shit baby daddy. So Carlos Smith has not, and likely will not, be charged with Romeca Blackmon's murder. The police have their man. They have Quadajah Johnson in custody. They have enough evidence to convict her as charged. They're not looking to charge her baby daddy, Carlos. So I'm really confused as to why Carlos even has a team of supporters campaigning for him. So in closing, I want to say this. Beware of Carlos Smith. He's capable of convincing people to commit fraud, defend criminal activities and felony acts, and he promises nothing in return. Carlos didn't commit the act on September 8th. Quadajah Johnson did. I don't care if he coached her or whispered sweet nothings in her ear. Quadajah Johnson pulled the trigger. She did it. And even if Quadajah Johnson honestly feared for her life on September 8th, a shot to the face after a disabling shot to the leg is absolutely a key issue for prosecutors in this case. The sequence of shots don't matter as much because both shots were deadly. Why continue firing after the threat was neutralized? And some of y'all want to see her get pretrial release. In what city? In which state? In which universe is that okay? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who can use this message, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Then leave a comment down below letting me know your thoughts about this video. Do you believe Quadajah Johnson should be the only one serving time for Romeica's murder? Meet me in the comments. We can continue the conversation there.